Lost at Sea with Doug and Mr. Dink and Pork Chop trying to catch this wild fish, this fake magic carp, fake Gyarados looking fish. He's jumping all over the sea, and they are in this tiny little sailboat trying to go against the angry sea. How are they doing this right now? Look at this. Angry. Y'all pissed this fish off. Look at this face. He's thinking, why y'all trying to catch me in the middle of a storm? We got lightning and thunder, and y'all trying to catch me. Y'all are inconveniencing yourselves to get me. Leave me alone. Why are you on the phone? Who are you talking to? So how did we get here? Well, it all happened. Doug was sitting there in Mr. Dink's house. Mr. Dink is explaining about this legendary fish that he's been trying to catch for over 30 years at Lucky Duck Lake, and how this was an excursion and how he wanted him to be a part of this excursion. With all the hype this sea creature, this fish is getting, you kind of want to know what this fish looks like, right? What does this look like? And we see. So this is the legendary fish that you had trouble catching for 30 years. You want Doug to take this fish. Looks like it belongs in Pokemon. Like it should be classified as a dark water type. Enough to get Doug on board. Now he is imagining what's going on, how this is gonna go down. What you did with Mr. Dink. Now Doug thinks he's trying to catch Moby Dick. Mr. Dink convinces Doug, and he is excited. He is ecstatic about catching Chester the fish.
Oh, you're great.
Why are you paying the camera like that on Mrs. Dink? Even though Mrs. Dink is not getting on the boat with Mr. Dink, she still showed up. And for that, she's a real one. My man, Mr. Dink. Doug, do something, bro. Don't let him just clown him like that. What happened? Did Doug really give Mr. Dink a soggy glizzy? Did he try to pretend like he threw up and it got on a hot dog? Doug, this is sick. Doug is a sick boy for this. Mr. Dink is so confused. Like, why do I have a soggy glizzy right now?
Did everybody tell you I was crazy?
Come up with a nice way to get out of fishing with Mr. Dink. Mr. Dink wants to prove to everyone and Doug that he's not crazy, that this fish that he's been fishing for is in fact real. Doug feels bad about bailing on Mr. Dink, and he pictures him in the middle of the sea in some type of barrel fishing alone. Mr. Dink tells Doug not to worry. He got this. He could get this on his own. And then his wife lets him know, hey, you got a lot of stuff on this boat. Like, I don't think this is gonna work. Apparently, this is a fish catching competition, and everybody's off to the races. And the mayor is waving his wig around. Jumped out the gates, and Mr. Dink's boat can barely leave the dock, and he even forgot the keys. This man's boat sank before he could even start fishing. And now Doug, Mr. Dink, and Pork Chop are looking goofy, freezing, while the wife is just chilling, looking at them goofy. Like, yo, I told y'all this was gonna happen, but you didn't want to listen to me. Mr. Dink is now regretting this attempt to catch his fish, and he feels bad, and the wife is going to go console him and eat some ice cream. And Doug also feels bad because he never seen Mr. Dink so down, and thinks of a good idea to try and catch Chester. Doug is trying to be creative and forms himself a makeshift fishing rod out of shoestring, a paper clip, and a piece of gum. Mr. Dink is enjoying some cotton candy, and Doug runs up to them and explains to Mr. Dink, yo, we can still catch this fish. Even with this makeshift rod I make, we could catch this fish. But as you can see, Mr. Dink is crying hysterically. Mrs. Dink is not entertained one bit. Doug is now fishing for Chester on his own, and he actually got a bite. And you know, he is struggling. Him and Pork Chop are struggling for dear life to catch this fish. And in the midst of catching this fish, he has a fantasy of how he would become famous for catching this fish. Dink is visibly hysterical again about this fish, and Doug decides to leave and go try to catch it on his own. Doug is still struggling to catch Chester, or what we think is Chester, and Mr. Dink is still just twiddling his thumbs, and he hears Doug struggling, trying to catch the fish. And so Mr. Dink goes to try to help Doug. And so now Mr. Dink is now in pursuit of catching what would be Chester. And everybody now is hands on deck trying to catch his fish. And so it took all three of them to catch this small pint-sized looking fish. And this fish happens to be Chester, the infamous Chester, the one that Mr. Dink has been trying to catch for 30 years. He's been in pursuit of this tiny fish for 30 years, and he is elated, he is ecstatic, and he's crying because he finally caught it. He's been spending all his life trying to catch this fish, and now he got it. So now Mr. Dink is the fish is crying because he doesn't know what's going to happen to him. Doug suggests to Mr. Dink, hey, you don't have to keep him. You can just throw him back in the ocean or in the pond, and then you can try to get him again next year, and you guys can keep up this rivalry you have between you. Your pursuit of Chester never has to end. Accepts that advice, and he receives it and throws Chester back into Lucky Duck Lake. Pork Chop spots the missing wallet Mr. Dink had when he was a kid, and this was the same wallet he claimed that Chester took. And this was proof that was the same fish from 30 years ago that took his wallet. Somehow he remembered his wallet had $3 in it and is visibly upset about $3 from 30 years ago, when he should be upset about all of the cargo he had on his sailboat that is now in the water.